Now, why do we have to learn more about yourself? You are more effective when your therapy approach aligns with your own worldview, core values, and attributes. Does it make sense to you? If you are a mathematician and you are, like very technical and so maybe you are a little more on the cognitive behavioral approach, right? And don't refuse that. That's good. We need that. But if you are someone who is philosophical and think life beyond life, you think about life and death, you think about existence, then you might take an existential approach, right? And if you were brought up in a psychodynamic kind of training, your professor, your mentor is very psychodynamic, and you feel right. And it really, this is you, and you are very interested in it, and you go deeper in it, you might take that approach. So I think we all have different orientations in our approach to psychotherapy, and that is good. But we have to be more equipped than just one approach. And this is why I always explain to my students and supervisees, don't stop learning. Even it's not, you cannot say, well, that's not me. Okay, if you want to work with people, it is okay to learn something that is not you. But I think if you know who you are, and you know your own approaches, and you'll be more effective in the approach that is more in line with your ability, your beliefs, and your worldview. And also, we all have our own problems. For example, if you were brought up with a very territorial or very controlling parents, right? Sometimes that popped up. Even you learn to overcome, but sometimes it become, like either positive or you act out just like that. Or if you were insecure when you have very insecure attachment, during your early childhood, and it might pop up in your therapy. So the more you know about yourself, and you resolve the problem that you have so that you overcome. It no longer will be, with the unconscious, you will be sometimes. We'll have to accept that. And be with the self-knowledge, then it will prevent you from making mistakes. And also will be making good decisions to lead to an effective therapy. Know your true self. Complicated, huh? And that is Paul's invention here. Whatever we do, it is dictated by what we think is meaningful. We always wanted to feel that we are doing things meaningful, and our lives had to be fulfilled and be happy. And not just happy faces, but it is say, okay, I do this because I want to do this, and it is meaningful. I was mentioning about our meetups, because to us, that was meaningful. We are giving a little bit back to the society. So you have to explore, what make my life meaningful? And also your true self. And it is your social world, psychological world, biological, physical world, and the cultural world. See, we are all made of the same stuff. We are what? Psycho? Let's see, a bio, psycho, social, and spiritual beings, right? It doesn't matter what culture you come from. It doesn't matter, how old you are. And it doesn't matter what, your psychological orientation, because we are made bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. And all these 4 areas we need to learn, and the needs need to be met. Self-awareness training is an essential part of personal development. And how do we do that? We do it through self-reflection and self-analysis. To be a psychiatrist, I was told they need 5 years of self-analysis. Do we? Anybody had 5 years of self-analysis? No. But we need to examine ourselves. And some people, like with this 30 hours requirement for the registration of registered psychotherapists, and they said you could use your personal analysis and your psychotherapy as, presented to them without the course. And it is true. So many people had, make themselves available for personal therapy or in groups. And those are very important because you learn experientially how you would do. And of course, we always use play. So the first thing is what I wanted to know, self-acceptance. We need to accept ourselves. A lot of problems occurred when people do not want to be themselves, they want to be somebody else. So they put on a facade, they put on a mask, they act, they talk like somebody else because they are afraid to dig into their own self, and they are afraid to confront some of the negative things that happen in their life. And we all have secrets that we wanted to forget. We all have problems that we experience in our lives that we don't want to revisit. And what would happen to that? They all suppress into the unconscious. When there is a trigger, for example, if you look at the sunset, all of a sudden you feel so sad. You stop working. You stop enjoying your life. Why? You couldn't understand that. But if somebody helped you to, what happened? What was it? The sunset that triggered the memory of my dad. The trigger, I see my dad was doing such and such, and you feel sad, right? So there are a lot of little triggers that brings back the memory. And you don't understand why all of a sudden the tears come out. So your clients will have those incidents. So this is why we need to learn to listen and to see and to hear what they have to do. Now, if you don't feel comfortable within your own skin, your client will feel the same. They're not comfortable with you. So often, there are things in your environment you cannot accept. And that also gives you a barrier. If the client brought similar situation and you cannot deal with yourself, so you would having difficulties to work with that client on that particular issue. So this is why we need to learn about ourselves. To a certain extent, we could never do everything, but as a service. And this is how you learn, all right, this is the thing, right? Francis or Cece, what did they say? You have something you cannot change. You have to accept the things that you can change. What was that? Was that you?
God grant me the serenity to accept things I can. And
that's right. There are things that you can change, And there are things that you cannot change. Well, we need the difference, yes. And the things that we can change, we make our effort to change. But the things that we cannot change, we have to accept. I wanted 2 things from God, and God said no. 1, I want 3 inches taller. And 1, I want 36 hours a day so that I can finish my work. We don't know what we're asking for, right? And somebody said, if you're 3 inches taller, you'll be taller than Paul. So there are always reasons. So we have to accept the things that we cannot change. But we will change the things that we can. But we need to know the difference. Self-knowledge. That's a very philosophical question, isn't it? Self-identity. This morning we talked about who we are. I was interested in the beginning. They said, well, what do you want me to tell about myself? I said, just tell yourself, because I wanted to know how much you want to reveal yourself without the guidelines. You remember every time when you go to a party or something, or a class, they will say, okay, tell your name, what you do, what you tell your kid, your family, and so you follow the guideline. But I want you to say, okay, what do I value most, right? And so that's why, if all your profession, your your things that you're proud of were stripped away from you, including health, including family. Well, just think about the refugees that we have. Everything was stripped away. I remember in 1979, we just had a sabbatical at UCLA, and we came back from Los Angeles, and that was the first wave of Vietnamese refugees. And the families who sponsored these refugees knew there is a couple, opened their home for Bible study and support for students. We had people line up outside our house to come in and to help them. You know, it was heartbroken to see young people. And during they called the first wave of boat people, and a young lady was raped, and kids have witnessed murder, pirates on the sea, and rich people had abandoned their home and their business, and they came nothing. And that's the time to know who you are. What are your goals? How do you live this life that is still there? And they came into our house and they were playing toys in the basement. And my little kids, at that time, Austin was 8 and Wesley was 3. Mommy, they were playing with my toys and they're breaking the toys. I said, you know what? These children have no toys at home. The ones that you don't want them to play with, would you put it aside? And the rest of them, they can play. Okay, Mommy. So they went out. And guess what? Now we have people who are physiotherapists, accountant, pharmacists. You know, it's amazing. Little things that you do to help people and how they flourish and contribute to the society. This is why, as a therapist, your reward would be to see people flourishing and people being functional again. I remember a few years ago, my husband and I were invited to speak in Tokyo. And at the end, well, we had a session together and kind of a banquet. And they said, would you say something? And I said, yes. I told him, I said, you know what? Why you want to be a psychologist and psychotherapist? If you want money, go to business. Because as a psychotherapist, you give so much of yourself. And sometimes you don't get paid, right? So if you really want money, you could leave here now. Nobody did, so it was a good thing. So the same thing with you, right? Why do you want, and Barney worked for 29 years helping students, right? Counseling, right? And you are, started a practice. It's not easy life that you will have, but it's meaningful. It is very valuable to contribute to the society, but also make you feel fulfilled. And this is why it's so important to learn a little bit about yourself, and also, are there any dark sides that we need to improve? And don't be a perfectionist. You'll never be perfect. But we will be revealed time and again and say, I didn't know I got that. Biases. Discrimination. We can't get rid of discrimination. We can never be completely unbiased. I have my biases. And if that is going to prevent me from taking on clients that I have bias against, what am I going to do? So in this course, we're going to have dialogues about that. And okay, from the screen we have personal aspirations and calling. That's important. If you're called to do something, then you will persevere, right? If you're not called, then you might just give up easily. I just remember a graduate student asked me to recommend him to do a Ph.D. in counseling psychology. And I said to him, I said, you know what? Why would you want to go into counseling psychology? Well, because I'm trained in counseling and I graduated from it. And I said, you like people? And because I know him, for 7 years at the university, he only made one friend. And the reason he and a friend got together is kind of, like teasing each other, living on sarcasm. Now, if you were the professor, would you recommend this person to go into a Ph.D. program in counseling psychology? Because that is an extreme example of who you are is more important than what you know and what you say. Because I know how much sacrifice, how much of yourself giving to your clients. And he may eventually, learn, but it's going to be a long road to learn. I've never done that before. And I just thought, and I said, you are so good with numbers, with skills, why don't you find something else? And guess what? He's very successful in the computer world. And that could still be counseling, couldn't it? Right? In the computer, you could still do computer counseling. You could still do Skype, right? But first, you got to learn people are just part of your environment, right? It's your world. And you learn more about yourself, then you could understand others, and you could be creative. I am not creative at all. My brother Dan, he painted all this with emotion and all that. I said, I can't create anything even if my life depends on it. But I'm good in photography. And that makes me feel relaxed when I take pictures and I look at it and I edit it and I crop it and I enjoy that. So all of us has some kind of ability that give us a time to rest and to enjoy. And that is important. What's another one? Music, right? You're either listening to music, or you play the piano, or you sing, right? Music is another way of enhancing your life to make, because it's very stressful to be working with people. So you need a time to really feel what make me relax, what make me happy, and what are our creativity. Creativity is extremely important because you are seeing clients of all types, all cultures, of all personalities, from different environments. If you're not creative, you only have a sheet, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's not going to cut it. You have to say, okay, I listen. This is it. Now I have experienced this. Maybe this will work. Let's create it and see it collaboratively to say to the client. Like what I'm doing with you, say, okay, what is your strength? How do you use your strength to enhance your practice? And that is very important. So this is why we need to know our strengths, our weaknesses, and also deal with our unresolved issues, the baggages from the past. Now, of course, you cannot deal with that yourself. You could get a therapist yourself, you could have group therapy, and you really have to face it. Then you realize how hard it is for your clients to face the unhappy and unproductive past. And also, we need to grow. And the last one, I was saying that we are bio, psycho, social, spiritual person in 4 different aspects. And this is very important for us to realize. Who said, know thyself? Huh?
I'm thinking biblical sense,
Yes, and philosophical too, right? So we need to have an inventory of personal traits, biases, feelings about clients, and their own career as a psychotherapist. We need to explore that and to develop a self-knowledge about some of the psychotherapists have gone through trauma and overcome. And then what about life crises? Like some of you have expressed, what happened? Something happened, I have to take over another family. I have to be, parents to my to my grandchildren. A lot of life crises that we have no control over. And so we need to talk about this so that it would not be traumatized us and prevent us to be effective psychotherapists. And what are our defensive mechanisms? We're going to talk about that tomorrow, about transference and countertransference. And how do we overcome? All right, back to what I say. Who you are is more important than what you know. Why? Because the personal personal qualities of the therapist may be more important than your competence. And the medical model discounts a person. But we still need to be professional. At some point, we need to take charge, and that's important. And then we believe who you are is more important than what you know. There are so many different approaches. I'm sure among you, you have learned and you have practiced from different perspectives. Psychoanalytic, cognitive behavioral, humanistic psychology, and existential and cross-cultural psychology. And we need to know at least a little bit about each, right? But you will practice one that you feel most comfortable in. That's what we said earlier. Is that true? The therapist is the therapy. That put a very, very strong onus on the therapist, doesn't it? The true self of the therapist is the most important instrument. The therapist's personality attributes affect what he or she does and how they relate to the client. Does it make sense? But also, it's pretty heavy duty, isn't it? Oops, wrong way.